Hello, 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 and welcome to the to the Nursing News You Can Use show. I'm so used to calling us out. I'm going to say hello to those of you that are on the Nurse Shark Academy page, those of you who are on the Baxter Professional Services page, and those that are watching us on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in. This is Nursing News You Can Use with Tina Baxter. I'm your host. And I want to start off today's affirmations, which is today is August the 23rd, 2023. The first affirmation is a river cuts through a rock, not because of its power, but because of its persistence. A river cuts through a rock, not because of its power, but because of its persistence. I really like that saying there. Number two, wake up with determination and go to bed with satisfaction. Wake up with determination and go to bed with satisfaction. And then our last affirmation and quote for today: nothing will work unless you do. Nothing will work unless you do. And I wanted to stop here and take a moment. This is going to be part of our leadership moment with our affirmations, because what you guys cannot see is that I have in my office this picture, and it says, dreams won't work unless you do. Dreams won't work unless you do. And when I saw that at the store, that so resonated with me, and I put it up on the wall. I remember having it on the wall at our old location on 8th Street. And I just remember thinking that, you know what, I have to keep showing up, because if I don't show up for my dreams, how will they come to fruition? You have to be there. And it's that persistence that you need to have that gets you up out of bed every day to get started with what you're doing. I so appreciated that. And that is what's kept me going and kept me driven all this time, is because I realized if I want to achieve my dreams, I have to put in the effort. I have to be persistent. I have to be like that river, which, by the way, my name means river. Tina means river. I have to be like that river and be persistent and keep going and keep pushing and keep striving and keep moving. I realize I don't have a lot of time to sit still. And I appreciate that I was just in a networking session, and we were talking about that persistency, to show up and to put it on the calendar and make sure you're there. And that's one of the reasons why I try every week to be here at 5 to bring you the nursing news and to talk about business. And so my question to you is, how are you showing up in your life today? Are you being persistent and going after your dreams and your goals? Those are questions that you may have. So I just thought I'd share that with you as part of our leadership moment. And let's go ahead and get into the news. So here's our first story coming from WTRF. It says Med Express to get rid of nursing positions. So come on, let's talk about it. MedExpress has plans to get rid of its nursing positions. According to multiple reports, MedExpress plans to fire all their registered nurses nationwide, which is about 150 locations, to revamp the clinic's staffing model. According to a petition, medical assistants will be taking over the nursing duties. In a statement, the company said, quote, MedExpress continually assesses and evolves our staffing models to better reflect urgent care industry standards. As always, we will support team members affected with job placement resources and seek to deploy them where possible to any open roles within the company. They plan to let go of all their nurses by September the 7th. Now, I worked for a company previously that did exactly that. We had nurses that would go out to the facilities with us in the nursing homes, and they would send a nurse with you. Well, then they decided to let go of all of those nurses that were out in the field and then put them into the um, call center, where they would take and triage calls from facilities and patients, etc. Well, then that model, they would decided then they would send in a medical assistant with us into the buildings. And then after a while, it became, well, maybe you don't need an MA anymore, right? And so it's going to be curious to see what happens with MedExpress and its company. Maybe they need to do this shake up because maybe they were too top heavy, but I expect that you're going to see a decline in quality measures unless they have nurses at the table. You cannot have good outcomes if you don't have appropriate staffing. I am not saying that there will be bad things, and not saying certainly that you can't go there for your current needs. But what I am saying is that I want them to take another look and how they are using nurses, because to blanketly get rid of all your RNs is probably not in your best interest. Because having worked with a variety of staff, and I am not bashing medical assistants at all. They are great, and I love my MAs that I work with. However, I also know that they do not have the skill set that a registered nurse would bring to the table. So we'll see what's happening. There is a petition on change.org if you want to join that petition. But this is happening across the nation. So this is a story that's been out there. So let's talk about it. What do you think about it, nurses? Okay. So this is another article that came up. I happened to come across this article. This is from Health News, and I found this kind of interesting because it says emergency room doctors beg for help treating children with mental health illnesses. And this was also published on NBC News. So it says 3 influential groups of pediatricians and emergency medicine providers are pleading for more support and resources as the number of children and teenagers with mental health concerns overwhelm emergency departments nationwide. According to Dr. Mohsen Sadinejad, who is a professor of emergency medicine and pediatrics at David Geffen School of Medicine at the University of California, says the scope of this problem is really great, but our ability to solve it is not there. He is the lead author of a joint policy statement from the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American College of Emergency Physicians, and the Emergency Nurses Association, conjointly released Wednesday. The groups are calling for local communities to increase access to mental health services before emergency care is needed. And so this is an ongoing problem across the nation. It says every year, approximately 500,000 children with mental or behavioral health conditions are evaluated in emergency departments. That number increased over the past decade, experts have said. Dr. Willow Jenkins, medical director and emergency and consultation liaison psychiatry at Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego, is on the front lines of the surge. She said that the number of kids seeking psychiatric emergency care in her ER has grown from approximately 30 a month in recent years to 30 a day. She says the volume is astronomical, and I don't know that people fully understand how many people are struggling. Jenkins also said that children as young as 6 are coming in, often talking about, and I'm going to say trigger warning, suicide. This crisis is only getting worse. It's not getting better. And I will have to say that as a clinician in the healthcare space, I have seen the increases in psychiatric emergencies going to the emergency room instead of utilizing the resources that are already available, or maybe the resources that are available are overwhelmed and can't keep up with the demand. Because I know here in Indiana that several of the local mental health centers, the wait time to get in to be seen can be as long as 30 days or more. So it says the call for help comes as a number of children and teenagers with mental health problems skyrockets. And remember now, this is partially exacerbated by COVID, as the schools were closed and some of the children were receiving their mental health care in the school. So when the schools were closed, they lost that important resource as well. Emergency departments are not set up to handle mental health crisis, which we know. A lot of times the ER physicians can handle immediate tension, gunshots, shattered bones, heart attacks, etc. But they oftentimes, because they've got gunshots, shattered bones, heart attacks happening, that time it takes to do a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation, they don't have that luxury. So what they do basically is mental health first aid, and do the best that they can. So here are some of the recommendations from the group. The joint policy statement recommended develop community based teams that respond to pediatric mental health crises in schools, doctors' offices, and homes. Add pediatric mental health professionals to emergency departments. Support emergency department staff information specific to groups at high risk for mental health concerns, such as those are victims of abuse, PTSD, depression, and the LGBTQ youth. It also goes on to say, by Terry Foster, who's the president of the Emergency Nurses Association, children and adolescents deserve the best care when they come to the emergency department during a mental or behavioral health crisis, as anyone does. But many times, a lack of resources can complicate matters. An increase in treatment education and resources can only continue to improve the care provided for not just youth, but all mental and behavioral health patients. So again, I want to say, if you know anyone that's in crisis, there is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. You can also call 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. Or text HOME to 741-741. All right, let's get on to our next story. And like I said, this is a very important issue, and I'm glad that someone's bringing light to that. So I applaud all the organizations involved in this. Right. This is an interesting story because we have talked about this previously, something similar to this, but as we are graduating new nurses and things like that, this is an article that was on Mother Jones. So I thought it was interesting. It's a blog post, and it says healthcare companies are using debt to trap nurses on the job. And I don't know, maybe all of you have seen that meme that's been going around on social media about the McDonald's where it says you're not allowed to quit, right? Well, that's kind of a similar attitude that is happening in healthcare. And I want to say that this is an attitude that isn't new. It's just a big resurgence. So I just want to read you a little bit about this. But if you want to read more on this, go to Mother Jones' newsletter and sign up. And read about it. But this is an interesting, and I thought it'd be great for us to talk about it. So let me know in the comments what you think. So it says, Neil Rudis graduated from a Denver nursing school in 2016. Knew that he's going to, get his real training once he starts. He wanted to work in a level 1 trauma center. So he signed on to the neurological intensive care unit at University of Colorado in a hospital, one of the largest and richest healthcare employers. His contract included a catch that's become common for new nurses. And this is something that I wanted you all to hear about because as new nurses have graduated and starting their jobs, this is important. And this is another reason why I think I'm going to really go forward with this event. And we're going to talk about this even more, but I'll get to that in a moment. And he says, he signed up that says if he quit or was fired before a year in the job, he would have to pay up to $7,500 for training, with any debt accruing 12% annual interest. Now, I'm going to say this. Okay, so how would you be annual interest if you can quit after a year? And you've already been trained. So that means anytime you leave, let's say you stay there 3 years, are you going to tell me you have to pay interest on that 3 years that you worked there? That doesn't sound right. Okay, that doesn't sound right. But I understand what they're saying, that if he leaves before then if he leaves any debt, he doesn't pay it off right away, he gets 12% interest. I understand that. I know what they're saying. But it's kind of like, if you read it up front, it's like, okay, you pay $7,500 for training after you just graduated from nursing school, and now once you leave, it's like having another student loan, basically, is what they're saying. So this arrangement is called the Training Repayment Agreement. Critics added the word provision to round out the acronym. So we'll see. So Rudis says he liked it. He said he definitely wanted to go into a TRAP. That's what they call it. Training Repayment Agreement Provision, or TRAP. I didn't call that. That's what they called it. He says. So, I mean, that's what it's called. I didn't say that. That's what they're calling it. So he says, I've heard good things, but within months, his excitement turned to anxiety as he came to worry that the ICU was short-staffed. Big surprise. Not really. Nurses assigned to instruct him kept getting pulled away, leaving him alone with patients before he felt ready. He said, I'd come out of the room trying to find somebody, he recalls, and there's no one available. The hospital ended his training a month early so he'd be freer to work and to help fill in the staffing gaps. When supervisors asked Brutus to teach the hospital's new nursing recruits, he told the trainees he was still learning and they'd have to figure it out together. That's pretty sad, but not uncommon, unfortunately. And that's the reality that a lot of our new graduates need to understand what's happening. I've told the story of myself many years ago coming off orientation, the night I was off orientation, and I ended up being charge nurse. I was in orientation on evenings and charge nurse on nights. And so it happens, unfortunately. I'm not saying it should, but it happens. According to this article, it says Rudis had blood pressure issues because he skipped lunches, bathroom breaks. Worse, he worried about the patients. He said when one exhibited signs of neurological distress and urgently needed a CT scan, 2 hours passed before they were transported. Another was left to sit in their own excrement. Rudis said he got, quote, got into healthcare to really care for people, but instead found himself denying the humanity of patients because we don't have enough staff. But with about $35,000 in nursing school loans, he was afraid to speak up about understaffing, which worried he might get fired. So you couldn't speak out when the conditions are bad, because if they fire you, right, then they can demand that money back. So he couldn't afford to trigger the trap and sink any deeper. He says, it just felt impossible. So unfortunately, this is a brand new nurse who's been in the job for less than a year and already thinking about leaving. And that's a phenomenon that we have seen time and time again coming out of COVID. This is what we're seeing. So this is interesting. So while we're talking about non-compete clauses for physicians, maybe it's time we look at similar things for nurses. But it says, and where you don't have these contracts keeping people working in places where they're unhappy. I find it interesting that they can let you go, particularly when we live in Indiana at Will State. They can let you go for any reason other than discrimination, obviously, right? Supposedly. But yet you have to sign some sort of your life away to say, I can't quit. I think it needs to be a two-way street. If it's an at will and it's not a contract, because to me, this says this is an employment contract. In my now, this is not legal advice, but in my opinion, that's an employment contract saying that you're going to train me for this position and give me the full training. So if they pulled his training a month early, is that not a breach of contract? I'm just saying. So they breached the contract. I'm just saying. So in recent years, it says employers of low and middle income workers have increasingly turned to debt-based contracts as a new way to prevent attrition from difficult, dangerous, or just plain bad jobs. Companies often present the training arrangements as an added benefit, but the associate debt also are often inflated and rarely reflect the actual value of the instruction. And that's the key. Traps, which have been imposed on truckers, beauty salon workers, and even dog groomers, aren't considered educational loans and in most states face little regulatory scrutiny. Research has found that the provisions have less to do with recouping training expenses than scaring workers into staying put. So according to this, it says, yeah, they are non-competes in sheep's clothing. That's exactly what I just said. Nurses whose commitment to patients already makes them unlikely to abandon their posts are particularly vulnerable. And a 2022 National Nurses United survey, roughly 1/3 of hospital nurses reported being in a training repayment agreement at some point, most often like Rudis in their first jobs. So that's exactly what there are. They're horrendous non-compete clauses. But this is what's interesting. He's this according to Dan Weaver. It says UC staffing policies meet legal requirements that the company both trains employees to raise care concerns and provides an anonymous reporting channel. Well, okay, all right. So Weaver argues that his $7,500 repayment obligation was a fraction of typical training costs, which they claim can exceed $50,000. But nurses are saying that who've been forced in the trap in exchange for little more than online summaries of what they've already learned at school. A nurse whose first job was at a Fort Worth hospital owned by HCA Healthcare, one of the biggest for profit healthcare systems in the U.S., told me a supervisor suggested she learn procedures on YouTube. Before COVID-19, nursing schools had trouble keeping up with the demands of a booming healthcare sector, even as some healthcare companies cut jobs to bolster the bottom line. Staffing shortages worsened through the pandemic as its stresses and dangers drove nurses to leave the profession or seek higher paid traveling jobs. But according to Joanne Spetz, a healthcare labor economist at the University of California in San Francisco, there are now probably enough new nursing graduates to meet overall demand, but not always where there's a shortage. Instead of punishing nurses, she said healthcare companies should reward those who move where they're needed and stay, more carrot and less stick. I'm going to say, what a novel approach. So if you want to read more about this article, please do so. Hop into this because we can get into this all day and really debate this. All right. Let's move on to this one because I just wanted to share this. This is from the New York Times, and this has to do a lot of issues around COVID, and this is why I'm talking about this. This is a healthcare show. This is what we talk about. But this came out from the New York Times, and it says how nursing homes failed to protect residents from COVID. And I'm bringing this up not to bash nursing homes, because that's not what I want to do. Because long-term care is very much needed in our society. But I think that we were ill prepared for what we were going to experience with COVID. And this may shed some light onto why. It says the first terrifying wave of COVID-19 caused 60,000 deaths among residents of nursing homes and other long-term care facilities within 5 months. As the pandemic wore on, medical guidelines called for promptly administering newly approved antiviral treatments to infected patients at high risk of severe illness, hospitalization, or death. But the New York Times reports that fewer than 1 in 5 nursing home residents with COVID received antiviral treatment from May 2021 through December 2022. So the question is, why? So they're doing a series of studies assessing their attempts to protect vulnerable patients and workers from COVID, along with interviews with experts inside and outside the industry. So you kind of get this, it's kind of all over the place, right? So Brian McGarry, a health economist at the University of Rochester, and David Grabowski, a healthcare policy researcher at Harvard, both gave the healthcare system a D grade overall for nursing homes' pandemic performance. Dr. Grabowski said, I kept waiting for the cavalry to come, and it really hasn't, even today. At no time during the pandemic did we prioritize nursing homes, and that's the overall response. And that's part of the problem. I happen to agree. It was almost as if, from a policy standpoint, it was where they're owed anyway. And I do remember there were conversations about that. That I heard sound bites, from politicians about this. So it's not as if we weren't aware that it was happening. I think it says on a policy level, we didn't really care. All right, so let's move on. That's my opinion. All right. So, but let's look at the numbers. He says more than 167 residents have died, Medicare reported this month, along with at least 3,100 staff members. It was Dr. McGarry, Dr. Grabowski, and other co-authors who discovered the failure to deliver antiviral medications. Early on, antivirals meant monoclonal antibodies, a difficult treatment. The drugs were in short supply and administered intravenously. Patients might need to leave the facility to receive them. But in December of 2021, the FDA granted emergency authorization to Paxlovid, a pill taken for 5 days. It drastically improves the prognosis for eligible patients who are 65 and older, sick, and frail. Virtually every nursing home resident meets that description. According to Dr. McGarry, that's the highest of the high-risk groups. Age and chronic illness make the residents vulnerable, and quote, they're living in an environment that's perfect for spreading airborne viruses. As the saying when a nursing home was like a cruise ship that never docked. That's what they're saying here. So, research published in JAMA found that only a quarter of infected residents received the antivirals even during the last 6 weeks of the study. By that time, Paxlovid was widely available and free. About 40% of the nation's approximately 15,000 nursing homes reported no antiviral use at all. According to Dr. Carl Steinberg, a medical director at 3 nursing homes in Southern California and former president of the AMDA or AMDA, says they're basically depriving people of treatment. It's surprising and disturbing. And so that's my question is if it was available and it was free, why did it not get used? And I'm saying that happened in all nursing homes, but clearly, overwhelmingly, according to New York Times, it didn't get done. So I'm saying this because there's got to be some disconnect somewhere that makes me wonder why it didn't happen. And here's the other grounds for poor grades, which is what I talked about. Early federal efforts prioritize hospitals. Yep. Hospitals got everything. Nursing homes got nothing. So they didn't have their protective equipment. Even if the federal government began sending out point of care testing kits to most nursing homes, they wouldn't have had to send the tests off to labs. Getting the test results took too long. And so they weren't able to detect if they had COVID or not, so they had to remain in isolation for an extended period of time. Nursing homes apparently didn't make much use of the testing kits, apparently. By fall of 2020, fewer than a fifth had the recommended turnaround of less than 24 hours. As for those lockdowns, which barred most family members until November 2021, the consensus is that however reasonable the policy initially seemed, it continued for far too long. So I'm saying this to say that as we have come out of this, we need to look back and to see what worked, what didn't work, so that we can do better. And this is why I brought this article up, because, again, we need to, on a policy level, we need to look at how we did in this. And this is just one critique. I'm not bashing nursing homes per se, because, again, they got the short end of the stick during COVID. I'm going to be real with you. I had nursing home directors for nursing calling me and saying, hey, do you know where I can get PPE for my staff? And telling me, hey, I'm the only one that worked the COVID unit. My staff refuses to work the COVID unit. I've got to come in and work every day. Those are real phone calls that I had at the height of the pandemic, which is how we got this show started. Just to tell people, hey, I found this vendor that has some PPE, or hey, these are the latest numbers, and this is how you can get help. So I did that. Yeah. So that's how we got started. That's why I brought this story, because we need to look at how we are treating long-term care and not make them an afterthought. And at the federal level, that is what we've done. And I'm speaking as someone who watched this unfold, attended just about every briefing from the state when we first started. I mean, I was there. It was on my screen. I watched it all, and talked to staff and all this, had phone calls because people knew I had, the show, and I was sharing information. I'm saying that long-term care got the short end of the stick. And you have some lawmakers whose attitude was, well, they're old anyway. And I hate to say this, but they're old and sick anyway. Most of our lawmakers, if you look at them, they fit this age range and category. Most of them happen to be a little bit healthier at the moment. Although we got a few that are kind of hanging in there that I'm like, yeah. And so the callousness that I saw towards older adults during this was appalling. And I'm going to call it out. Yeah, I'm going to call it out. So let's go ahead and move on, because I don't want to be too into the negative. I do like to leave you on a positive note. But we're going to talk about this story that came from the Washington Post. We've been talking about it for the last 2 or 3 weeks. I want to talk about it some more. This is from the Washington Post. It says, medicine without doctors, state laws are changing who treats patients. So Arlene Wright is a doctor, but she doesn't want people to call her one. She says, I usually tell my patients, Your Majesty or Your Highness is fine, she said. Wright has been a nurse for more than 20 years in Fort Myers, Florida. She began working in hospitals as a teenager candy striper in upstate New York, progressing through an associate's degree in nursing, then a bachelor's, then a master's, and finally a doctorate of nursing practice in 2013. Wright has always told patients she's a nurse practitioner, which is what I do. Hi, I'm Tina Baxter. I'm your nurse practitioner. She doesn't flaunt her doctorate or try to mislead patients into thinking she's an MD. Still, when Florida lawmakers began considering a bill that would have prevented her from using her title, Wright was taken aback. She says, I've never abused or borne witness to anyone abusing their title. It's singling people out, creating a bad atmosphere through legislation for the actions of a few. So, the Florida bill would have prevented non-physicians from using several titles such as Doctor of Medicine, wouldn't do it, physician, okay, medical resident, and hospitalist. Okay, that's fine. Doctor of Nurse Practitioner, Doctor of Nursing Practice. A near identical measure became law in Georgia this year. In Indiana, California ordered a nurse practitioner to pay, we talked about this, nearly $20,000 for advertising herself as Dr. Sarah, based on a law that several nurses are now challenging. We talked about that lawsuit. Florida and Georgia are two of many states contending with how much independence to give nurse practitioners and other medical professionals. It's a question that has become emotional for many medical providers and time consuming for many state and federal groups lobbying on their behalf. So the past several years have seen several hundreds of laws proposing to expand non-doctor medical professionals' work, the AMA says. Now, again, I'm a nurse practitioner. We're not asking you to expand anything. We're just asking you to let us practice to the full extent that we're trained. But that's a very important distinction, and I want to make light of it. But they're saying that they put millions of dollars, they have big money, in fighting back. So more than half of the states no longer require a physician to sign off on the work of a nurse practitioner who can have as little as 10% of clinical hours as doctors before getting a degree. Now, again, that's misinformation from the AMA. You're trying to compare apples and oranges here. And that's part of the problem. Doctors and nurses don't agree on what to call the issue. To the AMA, it's a matter of less experienced professionals attempting to escape from physician supervision. To the American Association of Nurse Practitioners, it's a battle for full practice authority, which is what we talked about. So I don't even want to get into that more because we've already talked about that. But this is where the AMA stance is. Patients deserve care led by physicians. My question is, why? Why? Because I understand. Now, again, if you want to call yourself a physician, you are a physician. That's what you should do. But doctor can be a doctor of chiropractor, a doctor of psychology, a doctor of law. We don't know. So, this is where some of those problems become. And this is where, to me, I think how healthcare is changing, that some are not willing to evolve. So I brought this up again because this is a big issue, and it's going through all of this. So yeah, it's just, it's unfortunate that instead of working together, and I think part of it could be media, big business interfering in here, but instead of working together to come up with a practice model that makes sense, because I guess my thought is, I have physicians in my family, so I'm not anti-physician by any means. But my thought is, Why not embrace the model to free you up to do the things as a physician that you are really trained to do? I mean, does it take a physician to treat the flu? Does it take a physician to like suture a minor cut? These are questions that I'm asking because I think that maybe we need to take a step back and look at healthcare as a whole and see how can we make things better for all that's involved instead of clashing and fighting against each other. And I certainly don't think that having the legislators come in with these cockamamie laws that don't make sense, because they're coming from the idea that there are a bunch of nurse practitioners going out there and a bunch of PAs going out there saying that they're physicians. And that's not true. I'm going to say that this is kind of like the big lie of healthcare, but there you go. All right, I'm moving on. I'm moving on. Okay, so I say that to say here's another story that I had to take pause with. And this is interesting perspective as a person who trains CNAs and home health aides. This is an interesting perspective. And it says micro credentials could begin to resolve the nursing shortage in as little as 1 month. Yeah, he can open the door. All right, so this is coming from Med City News. So I find this interesting that nursing is not exempt to this, because now they're saying that hospitals across the country are desperately struggling to find nurses. Traditional nursing programs take too long to train them. So what are they going to do? Creative Solutions create new apprenticeship type style programs for nursing assistants and medical assistants with an educational partner. Recruit a new type of healthcare employee. Invest in the new type of employee from day one, supporting them in their acquisition of micro credentials that lead to higher nursing certifications and compensation. Hospitals can utilize this approach to augment the role of the nurse and start to recruit recent high school graduates or those from other industries looking for a new career. So basically, is what it's doing is that it's going back to what we used to do, is training people in house and promoting from within. And so now we can train nursing assistants to do more under the supervision of a nurse. So they're talking about giving them a chance to learn while they earn, which is something how we used to do it years ago. So these micro credential apprenticeship programs are now coming back into vogue. So I find this interesting. Because there says there's no reasons hospitals can't take a similar approach. A CNA program can be completed in 4 to 8 weeks, and a medical assistant can be certified in 6 to 12 months. Meanwhile, candidates are working in the hospitals and other healthcare settings and getting paid. So they're saying that a laid off tech worker can go directly to work rather than paying up to $4,000 for a nursing assistant certificate course, spending at least 3 months learning and only then applying for jobs. And so this is something that we used to do years ago. And in fact, that's how I started out as a CNA, is I got a job working in the nursing home to get paid to learn how to be a CNA. So this isn't new, but I just find it interesting that it's coming back around. It's now in vogue. All right. Let's move on from that. Let's go to this last. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We're not talking about that one. Let's go to this last story here, or next to last, because I like to celebrate too. So I want to celebrate as our nurse making a difference. This is coming from the College of Nursing at University of Arizona. Dr. and I hope I say this right, Hayachol An, who replaces Dr. Moore, who retired from nursing in 2022. And so this is from Tucson. She is the first Asian American dean in the College of Nursing at the University of Arizona. Oh, excuse me, he is the first Asian nurse. Dr. Hayashol An has been preparing over the summer to welcome students into the department this semester. Dr. An has set his sights high and is ready to bring some new things to the College of Nursing. He says, we're going to expand our nursing enrollment by 10% this year, and we'll provide high tech nursing simulation education, including artificial intelligence and nursing engineering technology solutions to support our students for career success. As a first generation Asian American, Dr. An tells, this is reported by KGUN 9, he feels recognized and ready to serve a diverse class of nursing students. I feel very honored and I feel very appreciated that the University of Arizona respects diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. Dr. An replaces Dr. Moore, who returned to her faculty position in 2022 before retiring. So I want to say congratulations to Dr. An on your appointment as the Dean in the College of Nursing at the University of Arizona, and being the first Asian American to do so. And you are our nurse making a difference this week. Thank you. We need to celebrate first. I don't care who's the first, but we need to celebrate first, all first. And the fact that he's a male, I think that's awesome. All right. So I want to move to this community awareness announcement. This was sent to me, and I thought I'd go here and share it with you. This is coming from the Minority Health Coalition of Madison County and the Gathering of the Queens. They're having their breast cancer awareness walk health fair brunch October the 7th at the Anderson Impact Center from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Registration begins at 8:30. The $20 registration fee includes your brunch and t-shirt. You need to register and pay by Friday, September the 29th. They want pictures of breast cancer survivors so that they can, I guess they're going to do something with it, like put on a slideshow, I guess. Their feature speaker will include Autumn R. Carter, speaker and author, as well as an educational session with Dr. Spivey. For more information, you can contact Ruth Hampton at the Minority Health Coalition, or you can stop by their office located at 2428 Madison Avenue, or contact Vicki Nave representing the Gathering of the Queens, and you can certainly reach out to her at 765-621-1900. A portion of the proceeds will go to breast cancer awareness. So this is sponsored by the Anderson Impact Center, the Gathering of the Queens, the Minority Health Coalition, Community Hospital, and the Madison County Health Department. So I wanted to put that, if you're here local in Anderson, you need to get your tickets. Please see those individuals to do that. So that was sent to me, so I wanted to put that in the community announcements. All right, so that's all of the community announcements that I have thus far. I want to talk a little bit about the announcements that I have for us here at the Nurse Shark Academy and Baxter Professional Services. So coming up next week, next Wednesday, is our Fall Back in Love with Nursing workshop. I'm very excited about this because I want to talk to nurses about becoming the drivers in this seat for their nursing career. Whether you're an entrepreneur, let's talk about it. Let's take back the power that you have in your career. Let's find your niche, find where you need to go, give you room to grow and flourish, and fall back in love into why you became a nurse in the first place. So that's happening next week on August the 30th. You can sign up for that event on the NurseSharkAcademy.biz. We also have a couple of other events coming up tomorrow at Culture Urban Winery. Your local Alignable ambassador, myself, will be having our Anderson Alliance. We'll be meeting at Culture Urban Winery at 6 o'clock. Bring your business cards for the door prize. And we're going to support small business and talk about how we can support one another and network. So this is another one of our monthly events as your Anderson Alignable ambassador. If you need to register, head over to our Alignable page, and you can register for that event, or just come and we'll get you registered on site, basically find out who you are. But join us on Alignable and grow your small business. The goal is for us to start to get to know one another and do business with one another in a local community here in East Central Indiana. All right, so those are our two big announcements. Here's another sneaky peek announcement. There's two things that are happening. I'm just going to let you in. The first one is Journey Through the Land of Opportunity, my new book. Will be coming out soon. So I'm going to ask that you keep it in your mind as we get ready to launch, because I'll be having some exciting things happening when we get ready for our pre-launch. And the second thing is that I want to put together a workshop with a friend of mine who happens to be with Ladies of Justice with me, and we're going to put together a workshop called Justice for Nurses or Nursing Justice. I don't know. We're still playing with the title, but basically, we want to talk about how to protect your nursing license and how to make sure that you're doing the best that you can for your nursing license. So be on the lookout for that. We just had a conversation yesterday. This is a light bulb moment that happened yesterday. We're like, we need to get together and do it. She's also a registered nurse and a health coach. She's a nurse coach. And so we got together and we're talking, and we're like, you know what? We need to bring this together because we need to talk to nurses about protecting their license and how to do that. So that's going to be a Ladies of Justice event. So that'll be coming up in September, October. We haven't gotten a date yet, but I just wanted to put that on your radar. And then always don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Leave us a comment, give us a rating, give us a thumbs up, let us know. Comment on our Facebook page, like, share our content so that we can bring other people in so they can hear this great news that we have. If you have stories of things that are happening and I don't happen to see it, go ahead and send me some stories. If you know there's a nurse out there that's making a difference, let me know. And also, any nurse entrepreneurs or you know a nurse entrepreneur, send them my way because we are always looking for great guests on our other show, the Nurse Shark Academy show, which will be coming out again. A new episode will be out this Monday. So we've got some great content coming to you. Please don't forget to like, share, give us a star. That'd be great. Of our content. We appreciate all your love. Thanks and have a great day. We'll see you next week.